one I'm excited to see is the last game we'll be covering now. Packers going to Seattle to play on Sunday Night Football. Please tell me that we're going to have those throwback unis on Seattle. Those royal blues. Those are my favorites in the entire league.
At least the
But
greens. At least the greens.
yeah, or bring back the
Highlighter,
neon green from
highlighter.
the 2010 that era, the TJ Guzmanzada era of Seahawks football. Or was he even on the Seahawks at the end of his career after the
Oh,
Chargers?
oh
I don't know. We're
no,
going way too far to a rabbit hole to
he
begin
was
this
on there with
analysis.
the highlights. I got the jersey with the
Yeah, he was
Oh,
on
right.
there.
That's probably why. That is probably why I remember that. Is that you were wearing that, rocking the jersey back at Pleasantdale, way back in the day,
Yeah.
back in the Chicagoland area, where we don't like, very much do not like Jordan Love and this Green Bay Packers team. Jordan Love for this game is questionable with a groin or knee. Obviously, head coaches aren't really in the business of being specific when it comes to the injuries when they don't have to. So a little bit of vagueness there on the Jordan Love's injury status. That's obviously going to play a huge factor in this game. But yeah, Packers, as much as I hate to say it as a Bears fan, they're another team that was in it against the Lions in Detroit last week. As hard of an environment as you're going to play in, and they were doing what they had to do to stay in that game, to keep pace with the Lions. And a lot of that had to do with their ability to just be able to smash mouth, lean on the run with Josh Jacobs, Roll Tide. One of, has just proved himself to be an absolute workhorse, smash mouth, perfect for the NFC North, perfect for the cold weather. He is probably going to be one of the most valuable players as we get into these colder weather months, these huge games. Ball possession is going to matter. Clock management is going to matter. And, I really like the direction the Packers are heading with Matt LaFleur and Josh Jacobs, and I think it's going to be what ends up winning them this game. But what are your thoughts on it, Turtle?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly intriguing. I mean, we've talked about it in the past about how hard it is to go to the West Coast and play in that environment. So I think it's a great test for the Packers and see how playoff ready they are. Because keep in mind, Seattle is still very well in the hunt, and not in the hunt. I think they're leading their division right now as a 4 seed. And the Packers, if they end up being the second best team from the NFC North, they might have to come back here in a couple weeks, in a month and a half or so, and play here again. So look, a very intriguing test. You mentioned it, Josh Jacobs. Look, I'm a big Aaron Jones guy as the next, but Josh Jacobs brings an entirely different element and different play style that I think fits Green Bay much more. You mentioned it, being able to pound the rock in the cold, versus Aaron Jones, kind of more of a finesse back. Again, I like both players, but Josh Jacobs is a great fit for this team. Jordan Love's been on the injury report, I think, all year with stuff like this. He had a groin a couple weeks ago. He had a knee early in the year. Probably more maintenance more than anything. I think the real intriguing matchup is Seattle's offense against the Packers defense. Packers defense, I feel like in spits and spurts are can play some good ball, but quietly, this Seattle offense, with or without Kenneth Walker, can certainly have some success, and they've had success all year. So look, very very intriguing. I think both teams match up pretty well against the other. Um, for me, it kind of comes down to just Seattle playing in their element in the environment. I don't know if I can get to the point where I want to bet Seattle. But I do think both offenses have a chance here at success. Curious to see what Mike McDonald does scheme wise. He's a defensive head coach. He's well renowned with the Ravens. Can he scheme Josh Jacobs out of the game? I feel like the defensive line might be, other than Leonard Williams, might be a little bit of a weak spot for that Seattle defense. And
Here,
their linebackers as well. Their linebackers are more rangy cover guys more than downhill, ready to stop the run guys. So and that's the type of defense that Mike McDonald's runs. He likes having linebackers that can cover in space, and the opposite of that is, can you get downhill and be a thumper? Again, especially against a guy like Josh Jacobs, and I think that's the main question there.
And an O-line like the Packers as well, if they're going to be able to get their hands on these coverage linebackers in space, that's going to open up everything for Matt LaFleur in this passing game, in the run game. I think, as you mentioned, Turtle, real quick, Mike, before you go off, I just wanted to say, I think Josh Jacobs is just the perfect running back for Jordan Love for this offense to be able to play off of play action, run under center, line up, and just absolutely hit the hole like a truck, because that's what he is. He's, one of the best power backs in the NFL, and I could get all lathered up talking about Josh Jacobs. If he weren't on the Packers, he'd still be one of my favorite players in the NFL. Love that guy.
He's one of the guys that does both. Like, he can zone run and power run. He can do both. Sorry, Mike.
I think where the questions come into is Ernest Jones and Kobe White. Like, being able to absolutely put pressure on the Green Bay defense. Or on the Green Bay offense. Sorry, but I just do you think? What it will come down to is if Gino's going to be able to if he puts a ball up, they'll be able to be picked off by Jair Alexander, and that they have a really good secondary on that team. But I think
Jair is doubtful for this game. Just to note for you,
Jair's doubtful. So
I think he's doubtful.
Penny's a good safety.
Yeah, Penny's a good safety.
Yeah. And McKinney, roll tide 100%. He's been another guy that just absolutely taken over this season. Been really painful to see those free agency signings pay off as a Bears fan, for sure. Didn't mean to cut you off, though, Mike.
No, we'll see. I think trying to see. It's
think about this, too.
It's another point spread at home.
Yeah, and Matt LaFleur is a guy who we really need to start giving credit to as one of the, top 5 coaches in the NFL solidly. Just in terms of building a culture, being able to call
you.
You're lower on LaFleur, Mike?
No, I'm high on LaFleur.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I think we're all high on the floor. Yeah,
we're all high on the floor. Yeah, we all. I think, as I'm saying, everybody should be in agreement that LaFleur is one of the best coaches in the NFL, and that's scary when you got a guy like Jordan Love, who, if Jordan Love were the quarterback for a team like the Bears, or sorry, Mike, the Browns, who knows how haywire his career could have gone by this point, just because he's a guy who takes a lot of risks. But when you put him in that offense with a guy who knows how to use him and who knows how to put the pieces around him, a guy like Josh Jacobs, a great offensive line, deep receiving core, guys that are able to get open, unselfish. There's so much about this Packers team that makes them dangerous for a team that, I don't think the Seahawks are one of the best teams in the NFC. I think they're certainly above average, but I don't think they're in that upper echelon where the Packers have established themselves. Like I said, the Packers were right there with the Lions up until the end in prime time in Detroit. So it's going to be hard for me to go against the Packers at any point going forward. Once again, I think that Josh Jacobs is going to be probably one of the best cold weather players in the NFL. I think that's going to play out in this game too.
No, I agree, Pat. And I think where one of the biggest disappointments is how Mike McDonald has handled this defense. They're not competitive, and granted they have had there's a problems with Gino in terms of turning the ball over, but it's not been. He was hired as a defensive coach out of Washington, and that's where the problems have shown yes, on the offensive side, yes, there has been the problems, but the problems have also come with the defensive side, and I don't know.
Yeah, I just think the talent on that defense
It's
is
been trouble. You
yeah.
as you yeah, Turtle. I mean, you have talent on the defensive
Well,
side.
I think it's lacking talent in my opinion. Like I think it's like a
Right.
from a talent
We
perspective.
got to give him some time for sure.
Exactly.
After as a
Yeah,
first year head
yeah,
coach.
yeah. From a talent perspective, I think the defense is somewhere between like 18 to 25. It's not obviously the worst,
Mhm.
but it's from a talent perspective, and also Mike McDonald's scheme. It's not the easiest to pick up, especially if you haven't had a chance to get the personnel that you need in there. I mean, they traded for a linebacker. They swapped linebackers with Miami, right? Or the Tennessee. They swapped linebackers with Tennessee right in the middle of the year.
He's been good.
Ernest Jones. Yeah, well, because like the personnel that they had there previously doesn't fit McDonald's scheme and what he wants to do. So they had to bring in different linebackers. I just I'm with you, Mike. I think the defense in ways is underwhelmed. I don't know if I entirely blame Mike McDonald for it. I think it's a little bit talent devoid. Um, but certainly it'd be interesting to watch how they play down the stretch here for sure. If they
Yeah.
picked up on
This
some things and they're
And I think we can all be above boards to say this is a team that will be looking for a quarterback going into the draft.
Well, that's what I mean.
yeah.
Where do we really see this ending with the Seahawks? Depending on how far they're able to go into the postseason, can Geno Smith, establish himself once again as, is he a bridge quarterback? He's not one of the best quarterbacks in football at this point. He puts up a lot of yards, he puts up a lot of passes, but he also turns the ball over. He still has some
Yeah.
of those, Geno Pumpkin moments that got him run out of New York and had him, so far down in NFL talent evaluators' eyes that this was a guy who has all the tools and then, at times just puts the ball in harm's way. And so I think at the same time, though, Geno Smith has been able to, put up numbers, as I said, with the best of them. If he goes on a heater towards the end of the season, can he earn the long-term job or reaffirm the
And
long-term job in Seattle?
someone who I'm sure we'll be talking about in 2 to 3 months, whenever the NFL season is done, is where will Tyler Lockett go? Because he's not been any kind of integral part of the offense. Neither has Noah Fant. So, and you know who would
New
have been?
scheme.
Colby Parkinson, and he's on the Rams. Like, it's.
Well, see, I mean, Ryan Grubb's offense it's a college scheme. It's a unique scheme that he's been implementing. I think a lot of this is just the Seahawks being kind of in a weird transition point
Yeah.
where these coaches and these, this culture has to change. They wanted to change from the Pete Carroll era and kind of come into this new identity under Mike McDonald. And they have retained a lot of the talent off of those Pete Carroll teams, and for good reason, in the sense that they've been a consistently good team. I think if you look at their win-loss record over the past decade, I'm sure the Seahawks have to be one of the best teams, just win percentage-wise, in the NFL. They're just a team that constantly wins,
Or even
but they aren't one of the best teams in the NFL.
You got that because you had Russell Wilson.
I didn't want to cut you off there, but even in the Geno Smith era, like Geno Smith as a starter, I mean, he's not winning 12, 13 games a year, but he's winning 9 or 10. And look, they just signed him to a contract extension. It was a short 3-year deal. I don't know if they address quarterback this year because they're going to be probably picking later in the draft or making the playoffs.
Right.
And this just doesn't seem like a deep class of quarterbacks to where, like, if they had the ammo to trade up, they could trade up from.
And they still have Sam Howell.
You got Sam Howell. He's a good backup, I think. I don't know. Yeah.
I mean,
What
He
do
threw for
you think
another guy who
are you
threw for a
thinking?
bunch of yards and on
I mean,
the Commanders and
that's true.
like,
I'm not
so
It's
saying
throwing
hard
the
to
the
ball
next.
know
over a bunch. I mean,
how does Gino finish the season, right? And what
Yeah.
circumstances does it lay out going into next season? I think, Mike, to your point, it's just hard to predict. Could there be a quarterback competition, or do they view a guy like Sam Howell or a guy they draft? Who knows what's going to happen? Who knows how the quarterback draft class is going to shake out this season? But just Geno Smith is one of the hardest guys to project his future because once again he's putting up a ton of yards, but he doesn't feel like a guy who's going to go win a road playoff game, or even a home playoff game. We just haven't seen it yet, so
No,
we'll
and
see.
the
Seahawks are an
I
intriguing
think
team, but I won't be betting on them.
for the betterment of their team. I mean, if Gino goes, DK goes. So that's kind of where they're at right now. I feel like.
I don't know. Gino's got. I think he's got 1 year left after this year.
Yeah, he's got 1 year.
I think it's a great contract. I think Seattle signed him to a perfectly reasonable and great contract, which is why I don't think Gino ever gets outright cut. I think it just kind of depends. I mean, as an organization, I don't hate the spot they're in because they can pick and choose when they want to get a quarterback, and they still always have Gino, who at his best is a slightly above average quarterback, on a reasonable contract. And they might just be able to let him play out his contract and then address the quarterback situation, which is never a bad place to be, in my opinion, just from a cap standpoint. Now, you mentioned Tyler Lockett, Mike. I think he'll be I think they redid his contract this year, so he stayed. But there were rumors that he was going to be a cap casualty. I think that's almost a done deal probably after this year that he'll be a cap
at
casualty.
this point. Yeah.
I mean, he's got to be one of the oldest wide receivers.
Very reliable. I mean, I love
right?
love him as a player. Like, he'll be some nice veteran wide receiver for some team that needs a veteran wide receiver next year. But
yeah,
Jackson Smith and Jigba. Shout out
the Browns.
Shout out Jackson Smith and Jigba, who's been playing well this year. The number 5 in receiving yards in the NFL. Jackson Smith and Jigba.
Wow.
So
Shane Waldron should be trying
and
the hog.
It might be.
He tried to tell us, man.
He did.
Curious to see how the timetable will work with Charbonnet and Kenneth Walker.
Yeah, Kenneth Walker's a little bit banged up. I was seeing that he might not play this week today, Kenneth Walker.
Well,
no, he's in.
It's a must-win game. I mean, at this point, you're in December. These are all must-win games, and you want to have every running back you can, but you also don't want to rush back a guy who's injured, especially with Zach Charbonnet.
This was like a Twitter. This was like a Twitter doctor that said this. Like you're scrolling through fantasy, and the Twitter doctor said they listen to him day to day, but it's unlikely he plays because it's a lingering calf injury.
Sure, but I mean, you can just use logical reasoning to just. There's no reason to rush a guy back. Unless you think that Kenneth Walker would be the difference in this game. I'm not sure he is. They're still, from what I can tell, the Seahawks are still in the driver's seat in the NFC West.
This game that's going on right now will matter a ton for if the Rams win, I think the Seahawks are 8-5. They're 8-5.
Right.
So if the Rams win and the Seahawks lose, then the Rams and
every
Seahawks
game feels like a must-win. Yeah. Every game is going to matter going forward. But all this to say, when you saw the type of game that Charbonnet had last week, there's no reason to cut his carries out. It would only be to get Kenneth Walker back in. And if they could fold him in, Mike, to your point, I think lean on Charbonnet. If you're going to break it down that way, lean on the hot hand. Allow the guy who's been injured to, re-implement himself in gradually and make a push in this, crowded NFC West. Doesn't this division feel like it's going to be decided in Week 18 on prime time? And it's just going to be
what's the schedule for Week 18? Because obviously it's division games for Week 18. So
that's a good question.
I might give it a look right now just to see before because this is the last game we're talking about.
So they play the Rams in the final game.
The Seahawks do?
Seattle plays the Seattle plays in Los Angeles last game of the season.
Wow. I mean, so yeah, if the Rams are able to pull this out tonight,
That's going to get flexed.
yeah. Oh, well, it depends on the other games that happen over the next couple of weeks, but yeah, I could easily see that.
Well, it's also Niners Cardinals as well, so that could get flexed too. So obviously,
yeah.
it's just
Well,
all
the Cardinals
divisional
are kind of
games that
leaking
week.
water. I know we're not going to cover their game this week, but they're leaking a little bit. They're leaking oil a little.
Yeah.